Timothy Dwayne Hackett McGee was born in Cleveland, Ohio. In August of 1964, he went to John Hay High School. That's a city school in Cleveland. Went on to star at the University of Tennessee. As a volunteer, he broke all the records. Receptions, receiving yards, touchdown receptions, was a first-team All-American his senior year. After his college career was over, he was selected in the first round of the NFL draft by the Bengals in '86. He would be a huge contributor to the Bengals over the next 8 years, both as a wide receiver and a kickoff return man. He helped lead the Bengals to the Super Bowl in '88. In fact, had a pair of very big receptions in that game. One, an 18-yarder, which set up the Bengals' first score of that game. Since retiring in 1996, he's been a very successful businessman. And we mentioned you hear him around Greater Cincinnati on 700 WLW talking about his former team. And it's a pleasure to be joined by number 85, Mr. Tim McGee. Tim, how are you, young man? You're looking good.
I am doing excellent, but I will say this, Thom. In your intro, if my mother was still alive and you called me Hackett opposed to Hatchet, she would be coming after you. She would be coming after you, man.
You know, that's on me. That is on me. Where does that name come from? That's a lengthy name, right? I mean, most of us have one middle name. You've got two of them.
See, back in the day, you got whippings for not doing what you were supposed to do.
I know that. And I'm well aware.
My grandmother and my mother, that's my mother's maiden name.
Okay.
So when I turned professional, my mother's maiden name was my name all the way up until 5th grade. Then my parents got married. They wasn't married, but then they got married, and then I took on my dad's last name, which was McGee. So I'm just telling you, if you go outside the studio and you see the ghost of a 5'5" foot African-American woman chasing after you, you'll know who that is.
I've been hoping a 5'5" African-American woman would chase after me for years. I don't know about the ghost part, but I mean, God bless her. God bless her. Hey, let me ask you. You know, I mentioned you grew up in Cleveland. And you just told us about your mom and dad getting married. You took on his name when you were 5. What was life like growing up in your household in Cleveland, Ohio?
Well, it was fun. I'm from a, most people think when you're from when you're from the inner city and you went to an inner city high school, they think of dysfunction. That's just kind of common. That was not my case. I had two parents. We scrapped. We grind. That's what we were taught. So I had two older sisters that beat me on a daily basis. And, I learned to respect women and take a good punch. But, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. We call it the concrete jungle, but there was so much. I always say this, Thom, I have 2 degrees. I have 1 degree from the University of Tennessee, and I have another degree from the inner city of Cleveland. So one taught me how to deal with in a professional life, and one taught me how to use common sense and just understand from top to bottom. And that has given me a lot of range to deal with, corporate America or just dealing with kids that may not, have the, savviness of a well-spoken, articulate professional. So I love the range. I love the well-roundedness I had growing up. So I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world.
Tim, you brought it up, and it's interesting because you're spot on the first perception a lot of people have. I had Bob Huggins on the program about, a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. Terry Nelson came on a week later, and we were talking about, the upbringing for so many of these kids, primarily African-American kids when you're talking about the inner city, but kids all over America, white, black, makes no difference. And how rare it is to grow up in a household that has 2 parents around and the difference that makes in all of the things that you just talked about.
It does, because it adds balance, and you get both perspective. For example, it's kind of a cross teaching. My mom taught me how to treat women, so to speak, and seeing the delicate side of women, and also having two girls in the house. My dad taught me how to be a man. So you need that. So and especially at trying times, especially at when you drop a pass in the game or you lose your girlfriend, or whatever happens, or you don't do well in school, or something tragic happens in the neighborhood. different parents can give you that balance. They're your go-to. You kind of figure out which parent to go to for certain situations, and that's why I think it's important. And kudos to the mom that raise kids on their own,
Yep.
the single moms, and even the single dads. Kudos to them as well. But having that balance is very, very important, especially in the inner city.
You were a great basketball player, too. When I was getting ready for this interview, I had no idea you grew up playing with Charles Oakley. I mean, good Lord. I mean, you talk about a guy now put a hurt on people. Was he beating people up in basketball back when you were playing with him?
Actually, he was beating people up in basketball and football. So we always. I just talked to him the other day. Actually, when DeMar Hamlin got hurt that day, he called me. We probably talked for about 30, 40 minutes. But what a lot of people don't understand about him, football was his first love. So trust me, every Sunday I'm pretty much going to hear from him because he loves football. He watches the game, and we sit and converse and talk about it. But he was a much, much tougher basketball player than he was football player because he was able to get away with it. In football, he always says, and trust me, we still have this conversation today, that he could have played in the NFL. He could have been a tight end. He could have been a defensive end. And I'm like, why? The sport you picked, you were very, very good at it. But, I don't know how you would be feeling on Monday mornings if you were in the NFL.
Was football your first love? Because you were a heck of a basketball player from what I read.
Absolutely. Football was something that just came natural to me. It started on the streets. There's a story in the inner city of Cleveland. We did not have middle school football or sports. And then my what would be my ninth grade year in high school, we didn't have sports at all because of they had a teacher strike and all that. So we played, and I know this is the dinosaur days back when, the leather face masks or leather helmets, I should say, but we played on the street. So it was a love, a passion for the game, and it wasn't really organized, but yet it was organized. So, although I loved basketball, and I used to always play in the off season, I would go to Chicago and visit Oak. And actually, we called him Country because of his name. So if you hear me call him Country, that's his nickname. But I would go and play with Michael and Horace and Scotty and all them. And, it kind of gave me a very clear perspective of where I was as a basketball player. Getting your shot blocked a lot with those guys, it doesn't bode well for your self-esteem as it pertains to basketball. And I had my shot blocked a lot. But I did a lot of talking because I knew if I got them on the football field, and that was the unfortunate. Scotty and Mike, they talk all this trash about basketball because I'm in their profession, but I could never get them to come play some football so I can beat up on them a little bit too.
I got you. Why Tennessee?
Well, there's a very interesting story about Tennessee. Why I chose Tennessee? I didn't. My high school coach chose Tennessee. Again, I was telling you about the background. It was a hot mess. It was dysfunctional. The Cleveland Public Schools was. I went from John Adams High School, which was a very prominent inner city high school, to John Hay High School. And when I got there, the first words out of the coach's mouth, he said, Sonny Harris is his name. And he came up to me, walked up, met me at the steps and shook my hand and said, "How you doing? What school do you want to go to?" And he turned around and I was like, "School as in I'm already at John Hay. I don't really understand." He turned back around. I'll never forget. He turned back around and said, "I think we can get you at the University of Tennessee." So it was never really outside of my mind to really go somewhere else. And I remember Coach Harris, taking me, and just to give you a funny story, well, it wasn't funny at the time. I had never been probably outside of a 5-mile radius of my home. That's just inner city living.
Sure.
And when we went took an unofficial trip to Ohio State. And when they came and got me on that Saturday morning, and we were going to stay overnight, I literally walked out with the clothes on my back. I had no idea you're supposed to, bring a toothbrush and toothpaste and an overnight bag. And I'll never forget, I knew something was going on because I sat in the back seat of Coach's car. And when I sat back there, I saw him and Miss Harris look at each other, and I was like, I did something wrong. I wonder if they're going to tell me. And they told me. So all's good. But he was the one that got me at the University of Tennessee because we had John Hicks, who went to Ohio State, was the Outland Trophy or Lombardi Trophy winner. He had gone to Ohio State. Then Anthony Hancock had gone to the University of Tennessee, and it was, becoming wide receiver university. And, so he told me that's where I was going. And my dad was pleased. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And it worked out well.
Now Ohio State is considered to be, strangely enough, wide receiver U. They got all these guys going in the NFL, and Olave and Wilson had monster years as rookies this year, and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Smith and Jigma, blah, blah, blah. But back in those days when you went to Tennessee, at that time, it was known as wide receiver U. When you first got there, in this day and age, a lot of guys walk out of high school, they come to these big-time programs, they're contributors, if not starters, right away. That was not the case for you right away at Tennessee, correct?
No, it wasn't. That was something we had to build. We built our program, starting with Hancock, then Willie Gault, Mike Miller, Darrell Wilson, so on and so forth. And, then I was able to insert my talents there and continue the tradition, and it's going on today. And let me say this, Tennessee is still wide receiver university, Thom. I'm coming after you, man.
Come on.
Ever say Ohio State is
Come on, Tim. Come on, Tim. Good Lord. That was fixed, that whole thing. That guy went in the Bolitnikoff Award. Harrison Jr. is a monster. You know it, and I know. The kid had a great year. I give it up to him. He had a great year.
Now, wait a minute. I will agree with you. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a better prospect, had a better year, and is a better talent. In my mind, there's no question. The problem with college football, they sometimes spread things unfairly, like the backup quarterback, how these guys get these awards is, that's another topic in itself for another day.
Well, the kid had a great year, though, at Tennessee, and it was a shame what happened to their quarterback, because I don't think there's any doubt about it. If he doesn't get hurt, they're in that college football playoff this year. When you go down there, a name as the years go by that a lot of people don't talk much about anymore is Johnny Majors. He was at Pitt. He comes to Tennessee. He had a phenomenal coaching career. For those that don't know much about him, is he any different or the same kind of guy that a lot of these guys are now, the big-name college football coaches, whoever they are? Or was there something different about him?
I thought he kind of set the bar, so to speak. I look at coaches, and you know how brutally honest I am. I look at college coaches, and I think the one characteristic most of them have is they're bullies. And Coach Majors was no different. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just they motivated through fear of taking your scholarship, fear if you didn't do this, there was going to be consequences for it. So to me, he fit right in with the modern day coaches. He was not. He was a lot of positive things, a whole lot of positive things. And the one thing I loved about him is he was a communicator. But like most programs, unfortunately, those who produced for the university, and particularly the football program, was treated a little bit different than the ones that didn't produce. They were kind of thrown to the wayside. So, but Coach Majors, his personality, his strategy, his understanding of the game, and he was just so damn classy. And that's the one thing I absolutely loved about him. He was so classy, the way he carried himself, the way he's dressed, the way he made us carry ourselves in the way. And he let you be the individual. He didn't try to change your personality. You didn't have to, go around saying, yes, sir, no, sir. I just thought he was really grounded. But don't get me wrong. He was a hard ass. He was, he can get after you.
Your senior year in '85 is one of the most memorable seasons in Tennessee football history, and it's a rich history. You have the great quarterback, Tony Robinson. He has a knee injury against Alabama. You had lost the week before, the only loss you had that year against Florida. But down the stretch, Darrell Dickey comes in. You end up winning the SEC, and then you win the Sugar Bowl. If Robinson doesn't go down, is that a national championship team at Tennessee?
No doubt about it. Tony Robinson, and people just hadn't been able to appreciate his talent. He was the most talented quarterback that I've ever been around.
Really?
Oh my God, he was incredible. And I say that most people don't have. If you didn't follow him or see him, but that was one kid that literally had it all. I mean, he had the arm, he had the smarts, he just had the total package. And that was so unfortunate that we lost him with that knee injury, and it changed the whole dynamics of our team. And I remember I was never considered a knucklehead, and the only time I ever got I would say the nerves, the guts to kind of storm into a coaches meeting was, you mentioned that we tied Georgia Tech because we lost Tony the week before, and we tried to change our offense and customize it to Duro and do this and do that. And I would that's the only time in my 4-year college career, my 10-year NFL career, I actually went into the coach's office and I said, why don't we just be ourselves? Let Duro just do same play, same thing, everything, and we'll adjust. So if he throws the ball not as long as Tony, if it's short, we'll come back and get it. But we are who we are. And, I was shocked because, number one, when I went out, I was probably as all nervous as ever because that's just kind of outside my personality box. But, all in all, they listened. Coach Cutcliffe and Coach Majors and Kippy Brown, let's give it a shot. And we did, and we got on a roll. We ended up playing Miami in the Sugar Bowl, which was the funniest experience I've ever had because we were the only underdogs and on the All-American trips. Where I had, Bo Jackson, Leslie O'Neal, David Fulcher, Willie Anderson, Willie Smith, the tight end from Miami, and they talked so much trash all week long. And the irony of it all was we were the only team that won. They all lost.
That's funny. You're a first-round pick by the Bengals. As a Cleveland kid, A, did you grow up a Browns fan? B, did you grow up despising the Bengals?
I love the Browns. I absolutely love the Browns. The Cowboys was, one of my favorite teams where they were America's team. I didn't really know much about the Bengals, quite honestly. Even when I was drafted, when they drafted me, I had no idea who the head coach was because, I was considered a, one or first or second receiver to go off the board. And so the Bengals was picking 21st. So, they were picking, I think, 14th and 21st with Joe, and they ended up picking Joe Kelly. So they didn't need a receiver. It's like, why in the hell would they pick me? They got Eddie Brown, who was the rookie of the year, Chris Collinsworth, All-Pro. What in the world are they going to do with me? So I never worked out with them, Thom. Never. Didn't know who they were, know nothing about them. So it was not anti-Bengals or pro-Bengals. They just was not on my radar. And when I heard I got drafted, I am telling you, man, for I would say a good 2 hours towards the way, probably 4 hours, my agent and I, we were just waiting around for me to get traded. I really thought I was going to get traded, but that didn't happen as we know now.
When you get to Cincinnati, you're number 85. I mean, I know you're asked about this all the time, but the Bengals back in those days, they didn't have a Ring of Honor. They had the great Isaac Curtis. How did you get 85, and did you want 85?
Well, it's a mixed bag of emotions. I walk in and, you're always interested to see what number they're going to give you. Do you, are you going to, as a first round pick, are you going to, Mike Martin had 88 and that's the number I wore in college. Would I have to buy 88 or what number, whatever. So I walked in and Tom Gray, who was the equipment manager at the time, he put the jersey in my locker and I looked at it and I mean, I can't repeat the word I said, but it was like, you fill in the blank. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a setup. How in the world do I get this legend's number? An absolute legend. And you know what? But you can turn that in that doubtfulness, that concern, you turn it into a positive and say, okay, listen. If I follow this guy who's, in my very strong opinion, one of the best, if not the best receiver to put on a uniform in Cincinnati, if I follow him and if I can just do okay, they won't dog me out because you start thinking negative. You're like, I'm a first round pick. You're always going, I can't be a bust. I can't be a bust. So it was an honor. There's no question about it, but it was nerve-wracking at first.
Yeah, I have no doubt. You start contributing more on special teams as a kickoff return guy right from the get-go. You mentioned the talent in that receiving room, but you're starting to get more and more playing time as the next couple of years go by, and now you're one of the primary weapons of this team, culminating to a team that got to the Super Bowl. Well, I was explaining to a couple of these guys I work with when, for example, they were talking about guys who should be in the Ring of Honor for the Bengals. And in my opinion, James Brooks was the greatest running back the Bengals have ever had. When he retired, he was the all-time leading rusher. Icky had a great year that year, all that kind of thing. The weapons on that team, you being one of them, I'm not so sure, Tim, that the weapons on that team aren't better than the weapons on this current team. Now, some people might say I'm crazy, and the younger people are going to be like, give me a break. Would you agree with that, or you think I'm off base?
I would agree 100% because when you match up Boomer and Joe Burrow, you match up James Brooks and Joe Mixon, and myself, Eddie, and Chris with Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Yes, there's no question about it. The old schools are going to go with us. The new schools are going to go with but it's good to be in that company no matter what, because it's just that LeBron, Michael Jordan debate. Obviously, it'll never be settled, but there'll be lots of talk around the dinner table about it. And I personally, I think it's an absolute honor because T. Higgins is wearing my number.
Yeah.
And my family has some ties to T. Higgins. He's from Knoxville, actually Alcoa, Tennessee, and they. I'm thinking of Randall Cobb, but T. Higgins has a lot of ties with my family in Knoxville, and they're close and all that. And yeah, it's when we go back, when we start thinking about that Super Bowl, that year, that run, oh man, it's it's so joyous because when you were part of it and you came into the year after a down year, and to make that run with the group of guys that we had, everything just seemed to come together. And it's funny, I say everything, although we lost some games, Thom, I think for the most part things just went together until the last game.
Yeah. And
then the last game we ran into a buzzsaw, and that was just an unfortunate incident that just we couldn't mentally recover from.
I've always thought, Tim, and I've asked Chris Collinsworth, he's been on the show. I've asked Anthony this question, he's been on the show. I was down in Miami covering the Super Bowl and the team that year, working at Channel 5 as a young man. You and I are roughly the same age. I'm a year older than you are. But that Stanley Wilson thing, so many years have gone by now. What do you remember most about that day before the game when you find out about it?
How we found out. It was so surreal. We were sitting in as you know, we have a team meeting the night before the game. So we were going into our meeting, and we're never late on our meetings. Our meetings start on time. Matter of fact, as they all say, if you're not early, you're late. So we were sitting around, and the way it's handled for the viewers that don't know, first you go together, you come together as a team. Sam says something, and then the team breaks up offense, defense. Then you break up into your subgroups, so your wide receivers, running backs, whatever. And we were sitting around waiting, and I think the meeting started at 7:00. And while we were waiting, we're sitting around, and Eddie Brown is on my left side because obviously Eddie and I were pretty close, still are, and it gets to be like 7:01. Well, 7:01 may not mean a lot to some people, but for us, that's an eternity. And we're like, wow, we're running late. But it's the Super Bowl, something to expect. All right. Then it gets to be about 7:07. Then it's now 7:12. It's getting to be about 15 minutes late. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. And you can kind of tell something's eerie, something's not right. And you start taking roll call. And, it's a mental roll call at first, and then you start talking. It's like, where is everybody here? Just kind of looking around. And then Sam comes into the room before me personally. I didn't know who it was, but I knew something was going on. I just had no idea of the magnitude it would turn out to be. And then Sam comes in and he doesn't even like address the team. He just Stanley, and his first words out of his mouth was, "I'm sorry to report Stanley will not be with us tomorrow." Man, you talking about numb. You talking about mentally numb. But the first thing you want to do, you start thinking, I remember, did he die? Did he get hurt? What the hell's going on? So everyone just started looking around. I mean, from player to player. And, we're all in, let's just be honest, we're all in our subgroup. So, you're looking at the running backs going, what do you guys know? And, you're looking at the black guys and go, what do you guys know? And you're like, okay, somebody knows what the hell's going on. And then you look over at Jim Anderson, the running backs coach's face, and you know it's not good. I mean, you just know it's not good. And that was for me, that was the emotional letdown, because you don't say things like this. This is the BS that happens in sports. You can't say the real deal. And yeah, we can go out and put on our poker face and for the most part lie and tell people, oh, we'll be all right, we'll be fine. We're going to do it, because you're basically, you're fooling yourself. You're being delusional. He was our heart and soul of our team. And, by the way we lost him, the fact that we lost him, you can't make adjustments, because he's the lead back, on the pepper plays, which are the play actions. He's the lead back for Ickey and James Brooks and so on and so forth. Remember, Ickey didn't block for James Brooks, and James Brooks didn't block for Ickey. It was Stanley. So, we lost. I mean, I personally felt from an offensive side, we lost our heart and soul in Stanley, and on our defensive side, we lost our heart and soul, which was Tim Crumrise. So we had, the hill was just too high for us or too steep, I should say, for us to climb it. We just couldn't climb it.
You watch the Bengals play each and every week. You were in the huddle with Boomer Esiason. Similarities, differences between Boomer and Joe Burrow?
You know what? The similarities are this. They're both leaders by nature. Organically, these guys got it. I could see, it's just that certain air, that certain capture the room, that certain the leadership qualities that both of them have is something that, as they say, you just can't teach it. And Boomer just took command, not of just the offense, not just the defense, not just the team, not just the locker room and the training room. Boomer, in my opinion, like Joe, he took control and command of the entire organization. And those are the similarities. You can go to the physical similarities of arm strength. Obviously, one was left-handed, one was right-handed. Success, you can, when you look at them two, you go, wow. Because I've obviously caught passes from Boomer, and I cover Joe. I see a guy that I see two guys that, they basically have the steering wheel, and they'll guide their teams wherever the team may go. I don't see a lot of differences, because Boomer was surrounded with talent. Joe surrounded with talent. I think they're both smart. The relationship, one things that people don't talk a lot about, the relationship and bond Boomer had with Sam and Joe has with Zach. That, to me, that added quality to me is what really makes them special.
Zach Taylor is still so young. And look, when he first got here, he didn't have many good players. Now he does, and he continues. I think we're all watching him grow and evolve as a leader and being more comfortable as the head coach publicly. I'm sure in the locker room, he's been more than comfortable with that for a long, long time. Sam Weish is still one of the most beloved figures in the history of the Bengals. I get choked up just thinking about the guy, because I just thought he was such a beautiful human being, all the way down to his core. Didn't mean he was perfect. Nobody's perfect. We know that. But, when you look at those two guys, both offensive-minded guys, came in with that reputation. What are the similarities and differences from what you've been able to tell between those two guys?
I tell you, this is going to sound really interesting. For me, is really interesting. Is I know we can talk about the X's and O's. We can talk about the relationship with Joe, and we can talk about the relationship with Boomer. We can talk about how they had the type of experience. Sam had a lot of experience. Obviously, Zach didn't, and they grew. And like I said, I don't know what type of person Zach is because I haven't really been in a, let's say, intimate setting where I get to know him as a person from the heart out. Sam, I obviously know, but the most intriguing similarity to me that both has is both of them ability to gain confidence in the ownership and have the ownership follow behind them opposed to lead them. I don't know what Zach did. I don't know what Zach said during his interviewing process, but knowing Sam, how Sam would defend us to Mike and demand certain things, and Mike would actually follow Sam leads. Not all the time, but sometimes, and I'm pretty sure that happens with Zach. But whatever Zach has done to get Katie and Troy, Duke and Mike to believe in his system, that's been the key to their success, in my very strong opinion. I saw it materialize with Sam, and I saw how Sam made just little bitty adjustments, whether it was where we sat in training camp or having a stool in front of the locker. He brought Mike along. And, you know, when you have management behind you, now you have all three phases, players, coaches, and management on the same page. That's when you start getting things flowing in the right direction, both short and long term.
We're going to circle back to the current Bengals here in a minute, but I want to ask you a couple more questions about your career. And you know, you have the big breakout year where you have the 65 receptions, you go for over 1,200 yards and score 8 touchdowns. Statistically, anyway, it was the best year of your career. When you have that kind of season, you've been surrounded by a lot of good talent. You still had a lot of good talent, but now you're starting to become more and more of the man as far as the receiver room is concerned. Chris had retired. There were a lot of things, moving parts that were starting to happen. Is there a difference between, you know, walking in and you're the second or third guy? And, you know, I kind of relate this a little bit from where you were when you first came in to maybe where Tyler Boyd is at times or where T. Higgins is at times since Chase has come in, and now you become the man. Is there a difference in your own mind about what it is you have to do now that you're the man?
Yes, there is. And the number one thing is don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't let the ego take over, because whatever got you there will continue you on that path. Once you to have the understanding, for me, I had a great career. And let me tell you, I don't mean great career statistically. I came into a situation where I didn't have the pressure that I had to produce right away. And by learning the number 2 receiver, first number 3, then number 2, then number 1, that gave me a full range of understanding of the entire offense. So I knew, you know, where the running back would be, where the tight end should be. I knew the whole dynamics of our offense. And that type of growth made me a better number 1, number 2, because you're not the number 1 receiver every single play. Only half the game was Eddie. When I was the number 3 receiver, Eddie would be the number 1 receiver. I was going into the game. But when we call Chris's number or my number, we had different understandings and responsibilities. And that's what that's the biggest adjustment. And I said this on all the media, all the media circles I was in. It's a matter of understanding when it's not your day that's going to make you a better number 1 receiver. To understand it's not your day, and that will make you a better number 2 receiver. You can look at and judge, and that's what we do. We judge statistics. I don't judge statistics because I knew I can look at my yardage, my numbers, but I could also add probably about 20% of Eddie's numbers because I was the direct cause of him getting open. But that's people look at the football and don't understand the whole dynamics of a play. It was my job to get Eddie open. And when I say get him open, Eddie's job was on certain plays to beat one guy. It was my job to make sure the second and third guy were not a part of that play. So if Eddie beat that guy on what we call play action, and when Eddie caught the ball, you did not see another player chasing Eddie. And the reason being, that was my job to make sure those 2 guys were taken in a different direction. So understanding that whole concept of what you have to do as a team player, yes, people label you 1, 2, 3, but it varies. It changes at different parts of the game. It changes in your career, and to know all three, I was blessed by doing so.
Let's talk about the current state of the Bengals. They've ripped off 8 straight wins. They've been up and down, I think is fair to say, from a consistency standpoint on offense. I mean, their numbers are still really, really good, but they've had halves where they're great, halves where they're not. Now, all of a sudden, 2 starting offensive linemen have gone down. Collins for the year. Capel, we're waiting to find out if he'll be able to come back. Should they be playing beyond this week against Baltimore? How do you feel about this team now coming into the playoffs?
You know, they're first of all, you got to give credit where credit is due. Obviously, they won, I think, 8 out of the last 10. They're on the road. They're very talented. We know that. They're very talented on the offensive side of the ball. And Coach Lou Anarumo is, my most valuable player.
Yep.
And I just think what he's done with that defense, I mean, he's saved the offense ass so many times. It's just incredible. But for some strange reason, he, like in Cincinnati, we don't get a lot of credit. And he sure in the heck is not getting the credit that he deserves. But when I look at this team, the only concern, I say all the positive things. So I want to understand 1 through 9 is positive. Number 10 is a concern. The concern I have is outside of Kansas City and Baltimore, they didn't beat the teams didn't have winning records. That concerns me, because now you have to be battle tested in tight games. Their inconsistencies at times of halves concerns me. When they run against a team that's working on all cylinders, I think that's going to be the measurable. And that would have happened in the unfortunate game against Buffalo. Buffalo game was so important to the psyche of that ball club, because it would have given them the measurable of the 2 teams, 2 foes that they probably would have to face in the playoffs, deep into the playoffs. It was probably going to be Buffalo or Kansas City. They beat Kansas City, so you have your confidence there. Now here comes a Buffalo team that's probably more well-rounded than the Kansas City Chiefs. So I thought that game could have been the apex of them understanding who they really are. So I have some concerns, but sometimes, as they say, talent can overcome a lot of things on the football field and sports in general. So I'm not overly concerned about them, but I think they're beatable, and I think they can win pretty much every game. And I think they can lose pretty much every game.
Look, we know what happened with DeMar Hamlin. Can you draw anything, though, Tim, out of the fact that, the Buffalo game wasn't even a full quarter, but you had the ball twice. One time you took it right down the field to start the game, touchdown. Second time you get the ball, you're going right down the field, and it looks like they're going to score a touchdown again. We'll never know. But can you draw anything from that, or not really?
Not really. And here's the reason why. Buffalo went right down the field and scored a field goal. Yep. So if the Bengals scores a field goal, Buffalo can go right down the field and score a touchdown. You have to take into account that we knew, Thom, we felt, I should say, this was going to be a high-scoring game. We were just getting it was just getting started. But it sure wasn't going to be like the Bengals defense had stopped Buffalo, or the Buffalo was going to stop the Bengals consequently. So I don't think you can draw any conclusions out of that game whatsoever. You didn't get to see their packages. You didn't get to see their tendencies. You didn't really play enough to really get an advantage or disadvantage. Unlike the Baltimore Ravens game, you got a lot out of the game last Sunday that could help both teams coming this Sunday. The Buffalo game, by it ending the way it ended, and it ending so prematurely, I don't think neither team got a lot out of it.
The game against Baltimore, there was a time, Tim, you were a player agent. And I want to ask you to put on your player agent hat for me here a second as it pertains to Lamar Jackson. Now, look, I will never, will never, by the grace of God, ever question anybody's pain tolerance, toughness, injury, how serious it is, any of those kinds of things. Lamar Jackson has not practiced since week 13. Forget played in a game. He has not practiced. We know about this contract situation of his. He's looking for more guaranteed money than Patrick Mahomes got from Kansas City. There have been some things that have been said. I think more importantly, some things that have not been said by John Harbaugh, the head coach, which naturally leave you wondering what in the world is going on here. Here's a question I want to ask you. If you're Lamar Jackson's agent and he is, let's say, 70%, 75%, stretch it to 80%. We all agree he's not going to be 100%. Does the business side of this come into the equation for him to play in this game?
No, and that's why him not having an agent has him in the predicament that he's in now, in my opinion. And I will go on record to question why there's so much uncertainty around his injury, in that we always hear players, rightfully so, I'm going to go to get treatment 4 other times. I'm going to get extra treatment. I'm going to try to get out there. And in Lamar's case, I question. I don't know the answer, but I'm sure in the hell going to question. Are you motivated? Is this contract situation? It sure appears that this contract situation basically has had you over the last 5 weeks take your ball and go home for the reasons we know. So I would question that. There's no doubt. However, I will look at it this way. Lamar Jackson, there is not another Lamar Jackson in the NFL right now. You could talk about Joe Burrow, great, phenomenal. Aaron Rodgers, phenomenal, MVP back-to-back. You could talk about a lot of great Patrick Mahomes, great quarterback, but none of them have the qualities that Lamar Jackson has, because Lamar Jackson can beat you in so many ways. I'm not saying he's better. I am saying he's unique. So with that uniqueness alone, just imagine if they put some talent around that young man. Just imagine if he had a Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or even a Tyler Boyd. Just imagine that. He is a one-of-a-kind, very unique player. But the only thing, if I am the management now, I'm questioning, well, if he will do this before his payday, what the hell is going to happen after he gets paid? So I think he's causing some of his own potential problems, or I would say concerns that the ownership may have, and including his teammates. His teammates need him in the worst way.
Well, Tim, you took the words right out of my mouth, because having grown up around sports and been fortunate enough to be around sports and locker rooms in football and clubhouses in baseball, to me, the most important thing of this whole thing, if I were Lamar Jackson, is how my teammates are going to look at me. How do they look at me now? How are they going to look at me, as you just pointed out, but how are they going to look at me if I don't play? How are they going to look at me if then I sign this generational money contract, right? And I'm coming back in the locker room next year when I didn't play in the playoffs last year, and for a lot of those guys, it might be the only time they ever have a chance to play in the postseason, or even be on an NFL roster for that matter, right?
Right. When you look at it from a team standpoint, the individuals, no one is going to go on the record and say, I don't think he's hurt to the magnitude. I think he's making a statement here. But they'll have that bedroom conversation with their wives, their girlfriends, friends, and amongst themselves. But the positive could be so uplifting if he just showed up to practice. I'm talking practice, the old Allen Iverson practice. If he shows up to practice, that would be so uplifting to his team going into this game against the Cincinnati Bengals. If he comes out with his sweats on and his shoulder pads, Thom, you and I know, and I tell people this, you do not have to play in the National Football League. You could play in college or high school, and you understand the dynamics of the locker room. It's no different. As a matter of fact, it's probably better and more cohesive in high school and college than it is in the pros, because pros are individuals that come and go more so than high school and college. So If Lamar Jackson makes the statement, I'm with my team, by putting my uniform on and giving his best shot, that will resonate in that locker room among all the individual players. And collectively, I think that would uplift not only their spirits, but it sure in the hell would uplift their confidence that they can come to Paycor Stadium and not just compete, but win the football game.
All right. Look, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but, I think we all agree, and I had a long conversation about this the other day on the show with Brian Billick, former Ravens Super Bowl winning head coach. There is a significant difference playing a divisional opponent when you're now walking into the playoffs than there is playing somebody like Jacksonville or playing somebody like the Chargers, right? That really don't know you and really haven't gone toe-to-toe. If you're the center or you're a guard, Zeitler, and going up against DJ Reader, you know what you're in for in that game because you've already played him a couple of times this year and you played him a couple of times last year and you've squared off with this cat many, many times. And that goes throughout the entire offense, defense, both sides. Would you expect that this is going to be a tight game on Sunday night?
Hell yes. There's no question. Let me tell you, Baltimore has the psychological advantage. The Bengals have the talent advantage. But Baltimore got to rest their starters, key starters. And now, just like you said, remember, these are cousins that play in the backyard every day. They know each other. They understand each other. There's not going to be any secrets. But the reason I say psychologically Baltimore has an advantage is because they're getting players back. And if Lamar Jackson obviously will be the key to that, he'll be the trump card. And the Bengals lost a key player. Now the Bengals are down 2 offensive linemen. That could be humongous. Remember, Thom, here in Cincinnati and around the nation, we haven't talked about Joe Burrow being sacked 7, 8, 9 times this year since the first game. Now, will that come back to haunt them because now they have backups, and backups are backups for a reason because they don't have the level of talent that the first team has. So you got a Baltimore Ravens team that has one hell of a defense. And here's what's funny, and I love the strategic part of it. I hear the Bengals fan, man, Joe was off. Man, he just missed T. Higgins, and if Jamar Chase would have caught that ball, man, they were just off a little bit. However, Baltimore missed Joe Burrow on several sacks where they let him get away. So that adds to the irony of what can happen on Sunday night. But I don't see either team with a huge advantage, and I really believe Baltimore can come out on top or Cincinnati can come out on top.
So if you're a betting man, what would you bet on? I don't know if you are a betting man. If you were a betting man, you think the Bengals being at home, Burrow, you think they win the game?
Yeah, I do. I have to hedge my bet here. I go with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. But if Lamar Jackson plays, I think it's a pick 'em.
Okay. All right. Couple of other quick topics because you have a unique perspective on all this. Tua Tagovailoa. We're getting off the reservation here now, a little bit away from the Bengals, but I just want to get your thoughts. Again, you played. You have the unique perspective of having played, also been an agent. You understand all the inner workings here. Should Tua be on the football field this Sunday if he clears concussion protocol?
Let me add one more unfortunate part of my resume. My career ended in my 10th year in a preseason game where I was knocked out cold, spent 3 days in a hospital and 1 day in intensive care for a concussion that, unfortunately they thought was my neck. Knowing what I know, knowing and seeing Damar Hamlin, knowing what I know, I think he should not play. And here's the reason why. The trauma his head has experienced or his brain has experienced is no different. And I tried to get, the quote unquote normal person to understand. Playing football on Sunday is like being in multiple car accidents. Your head, your brain is getting jarred around. And we understand there's, collateral damage in playing the game. And we totally accept that. So I'm not whining for anyone. But right now, here's what I can factually tell Tua about my personal experience. The more concussions you have, the deeper you go into a concussed state after the next one, the next one, the next one, and the next one. They get worse. They don't get better. What he's experienced this year, I don't think you need to be a medical doctor. I don't think you need to be a neurologist. I think you just need to have common sense to say, okay, Miami stinks right now with or without him. You're probably going to lose the Buffalo, and you may not want to take that into account. But from a health standpoint, why are you risking this, especially at your age? It's time to sit the young man down, let him take some tests during the offseason, and make sure he is 100% healthy, opposed to getting another hit. He will be hit on the head, Thom. He will take some hits to his head when he plays against the Buffalo Bills, if he plays. I wouldn't risk it. I don't think it's worth it.
Last thing I want to ask you. You came here, you played here, you left for a year, you came back here, you talked about the injury that ended your career. What kept you in Cincinnati?
My wife. my wife, I want you to hear. When I got hurt, I told you I was in the hospital, and I laugh at this, although it was serious at the time. My wife she announced my retirement. She walked in and she was so, distraught. She was like, "Oh, we're done. We're done. We're done. Okay. All right. We're done." So that was number one. So I think you know and understand who's the boss.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to live in Florida when my career ended. We had a house in Florida. We had a house here, and I really wanted to live there. And I said, and she told me one day, she said, "Why?" Well, my oldest daughter, Keandra, is turning 5. We have to pick her schools. Now it's time to really buckle down with the school systems. And I said, "Oh, well, we need to look around here." And she said, "For what?" I instantly knew I was going to be living in Cincinnati. And I've lived here since then. I love Cincinnati. The winter times is a little rough as you get older, but I mean, Cincinnati is an awesome town. It really is. It's one of those cities that it may not get the 10 and, across the board or get a 10 on the score. But it's solid. Low crime, great school system, great people, Midwest, 4 seasons. I can't complain. I mean, 2 sports teams, no, is it Vegas? Is it Miami, Florida? Is it New York? Is it Chicago? No. But I can name a whole lot of the cities that's not. So I'm a Cincinnatian. I'm a transplant. I love it here. I enjoy it here. My family's here. We raised our kids here. Our kids are here. All 3 of our kids are here. So I think that speaks for itself.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tim, we're lucky to have you. You have always been one of my all-time favorites, and I love listening to you on the radio. And just like today in this show, you lay it out there. I mean, everybody wants, the orange-colored glasses, and there's been a lot to root for about this team. But now you're starting the real season, if you will, in the postseason, and there are strengths and weaknesses, and you laid them all out there for us here today, and I can't thank you enough for your time, man. You be well, and God bless you.
I appreciate you having me, Thom. Thank you. It's been an honor. It's been a true honor to be with you. A true honor.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it, buddy. All the best. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.